the United States executed 25 men in 2024, with no single woman among them. Does that mean women do not commit crimes or are not sentenced to death? Today, we will unveil all women who were executed in the 21st century, revealing their final words and last meals. Amber McLaughlin, State, Missouri. Date of execution, January 3, 2023. Amber was an American transgender woman. She was executed in Missouri for the sexual assault and murder of her ex-girlfriend, Beverly Guenther. Her transgender status became known while she was in prison. Thus, she became the first transgender person who faced execution in the U.S. However, her male name, Scott A. McLaughlin, remained on her death warrant and prison records. In August 2021, her death sentence was reinstated and finally carried out on January 3, 2023. She spoke quietly with a spiritual advisor at her side as the fatal dose of pentobarbital was injected. Her last words were, "I am sorry for what I did, and I am a loving and caring person." She was served a final meal of a cheeseburger, French fries, a strawberry milkshake, and peanuts. McLaughlin breathed heavily a couple of times, then shut her eyes and was pronounced dead a few minutes later. Lisa Marie Montgomery, State, Kansas. Date of execution, January 13, 2021. Lisa Marie Montgomery was executed for killing a pregnant woman named Steinette. On December 16th, Montgomery drove from Malvern to Skidmore and arrived at Stinnett's home around 12:30 p.m. Unknown to Stinnett, Montgomery had a sharp kitchen knife and a white cord in her jacket pocket. Stinnett suggested they play with the puppies outside. At about 2:30 p.m., Stinnett received a call from Harper, her mother. A few minutes after the phone conversation, Montgomery attacked the pregnant woman. She strangled her with the cord until she became unconscious. Next is the baby in her womb. Montgomery used the kitchen knife to cut open Stinnett's abdomen. This jolted Stinnett back to life. She struggled, but Montgomery strangled her a second time, which led to her death. Lisa then extracted the fetus from Stinnett's womb, cut the umbilical cord, and left with the baby. A few minutes' drive from Stinnett's home, Lisa stopped to clean up the baby. She retrieved the car seat she had kept in the car's trunk and placed the baby there. She then drove to Topeka, Kansas. At 3:30 p.m., Stinnett's mother, Becky Harper, became agitated as Stinnett returned no calls. She then walked to her house, only to meet her in a pool of blood. This was an hour after the murder. Harper called the authorities and said her daughter's wounds looked like her stomach had exploded. Paramedics tried to revive Stinnett, but were unsuccessful. She was pronounced dead at St. Francis Hospital in Maryville. Back at Topeka, Montgomery called her husband, Kevin, that same day at 5:15 p.m. She told him that while Christmas shopping, she had gone into labor and given birth. Her husband found the statement bizarre. Her giving birth and driving herself home is unusual. However, Montgomery said she had delivered at the Birth and Women's Center in Topeka, although the center recorded 0 births on that fateful day. On the 7th of December, police arrested Montgomery at her farmhouse in Malvern, Kansas. Before she was apprehended, a witness said she took the infant, her husband, and 2 teenage sons to a restaurant for breakfast. Kathy Sage, owner of the Whistle Stop Cafe in Malvern, Kansas, said she was showing the baby off as her own. She also reportedly took the child to church and named it Abigail because she found the name in the Bible. Since the child was moved from Missouri to Kansas, her case was decided at the federal level. Montgomery was charged with the federal offense of kidnapping resulting in death, a crime established by the Federal Kidnapping Act of 1932 and described in Title 18 of the United States Code. Neurologists said that the head injuries Montgomery had some years before committing this brutal act could have damaged the part of the brain that controls aggression. During her trial in federal court, her defense attorneys, led by Frederick Duchert, asserted that she had pseudocyesis. This mental condition causes a woman to falsely believe she is pregnant when she's not. On October 22, 2007, jurors found Montgomery guilty, rejecting the defense claim that she was delusional. On October 26th, the jury recommended the death sentence. Judge Gary A. Fenner formally sentenced Montgomery to death on April 4, 2008. She was executed by lethal injection shortly after midnight on January 13, 2021, having exhausted the appeals process. Montgomery became the first female federal inmate since 1953 to be executed by the United States federal government. When asked if she had any last words, she replied, "No, she was pronounced dead at 1:31 a.m. There was no record of a last meal." Kelly Renee Gissendaner, State, Georgia, date of execution, September 30, 2015. Kelly teamed up with Bruce Owen to orchestrate the death of her husband, Douglas Gissendaner. On February 7, 1997, Bruce Owen waited near the couple's home in Auburn. When Douglas arrived, Owen forced him into his car and drove him to a wooded area in Gwinnett County near Harbins Park. Owen hit Douglas on the head with a nightstick and stabbed him multiple times in the back. Later, Kelly arrived, and together they set Douglas's car on fire and hid his body in the woods. Authorities soon caught wind of what happened and arrested Owen and Kelly. Before their trial, they were offered a plea deal, life in prison with no parole for 25 years. Kelly turned it down. She was ultimately found guilty of her husband's murder and sentenced to death in 1998. In exchange for a plea agreement, Owen testified against her and received a life sentence. He told the jury that 3 months before the murder, Kelly had approached him about a way to get rid of her husband. He further testified that she thought murder was the only way to get Douglas out of her life and still get the house and a payoff from his life insurance policy. During the trial, it was revealed that Kelly had threatened witnesses and also plotted to pay a witness to commit perjury. After receiving the death sentence, Kelly was imprisoned at Metro State Prison until its closure in 2011. She was then transferred to Arundel State Prison. While incarcerated, she converted to Christianity and ministered to other women living in prison with her. Kelly's execution was fixed for February 25, 2015. However, a winter storm delayed it until March 2, 2015. This was further delayed when one of the execution substances was assumed to have been spoiled through improper storage. Later, it was found that the substance had only separated from the solution because it was stored at a lower temperature than suggested. She could have been executed on September 29, 2015, but she was again delayed by appeals. She was finally executed by lethal injection at the Georgia Diagnostic and Classification Prison in Jackson, Georgia, on September 30, 2015, at 12:21 a.m. For her last words, she cried, prayed, sang Amazing Grace, and said, "And I love you, Sally, and I love you, Susan. You let my kids know I went out singing Amazing Grace, and tell the Gissendaner family I am so sorry. That amazing man lost his life because of me, and if I could take it back, if this would change it, I would have done it a long time ago. But it's not, and I just hope they can find peace, and I hope they find some happiness. God bless you." Kelly Renee Gissendaner's last meal request included 2 cheeseburgers, 2 large orders of French fries, lemonade, cherry vanilla ice cream, cheese dip and chips, Texas fajita nachos, and a diet frosted lemonade. Lisa Ann Coleman, State, Texas. Date of execution, September 17, 2014. Lisa Ann Coleman and Marcella Williams cooperated to end the life of a young boy named Devontae. On July 26, 2004, Williams called 911 and told a dispatcher that Devontae had stopped breathing. The call dropped just as the dispatcher was about to explain how to do CPR. When emergency medical workers arrived, Coleman told them that Devontae had stopped breathing a few minutes before. However, they soon realized that wasn't accurate when they noticed signs of rigor mortis. It became obvious that Devontae had been dead for several hours. Devontae was only 9 years old when he passed away. His body had 250 scars, including infected wounds on his wrists and legs, indicating he had been tied up with plastic extension cords. A bloodstain was discovered on a golf club in their home. Coleman and Marcella Williams were immediately arrested and charged with injury to a child. Coleman was executed by lethal injection with pentobarbital. In the death chamber, she smiled at her friends and aunt, who were watching through a window. She expressed her love for the other women on Texas's death row and encouraged them to keep their heads up. She mouthed an audible kiss and added, "I'm all right. Tell them I finished strong. God is good." Shortly before she closed her eyes and stopped moving, she said, "Love you all." As for her last meal, she chose a cheeseburger with onions, French fries, and a vanilla shake. Suzanne Margaret Sue Basso, State, Texas. Date of execution, February 5, 2014. Sue was one of the 6 co-defendants convicted in the August 1998 torture and murder of 59-year-old Louis Buddy Musson. Buddy, who had a mental disability, was targeted for his life insurance money. Lewis's death happened 16 days after he arrived at the Basso's residence. Sue, her son James O'Malley, Bernice Aarons Miller and her children, Craig and Hope Aarons, and Hope's fiancé, all agreed to end Louis's life. They forced him to do their chores and inflicted injuries on his body before killing him. According to O'Malley, Musso was killed at Miller's apartment, where he was beaten and burned with cigarettes as he sat on a child's playmat. The group also used a wire brush on him, then put him in a bathtub filled with kitchen cleaner and bleach. They clothed Musso's body before leaving it in Galena Park, Texas. A jogger found it and called the police. The Galena Park Police Department ruled that Musso's death was due to multiple blunt impact trauma. Sue was sentenced to death in October 1999 and held while on death row at the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Mountain View Unit, now called Patrielle O'Daniel Unit in Gatesville. She ate regular prison food of baked chicken, fish, boiled eggs, carrots, green beans, and sliced bread. She was executed on February 5, 2014. When asked if she had a last statement, Sue told the prison warden, "No, sir." She was pronounced dead at 6:26 p.m., 11 minutes after receiving a lethal dose of the substance pentobarbital. Kimberly LaGale McCarthy, State, Texas. Date of execution, June 26, 2013. Kimberly was convicted and sentenced to death for the 1997 murder of her neighbor, 71-year-old retired college professor Dorothy Booth. This happened in Dorothy's Lancaster home during a robbery. Kimberly called her neighbor on July 21, 1990 even, and said that she was on her way to borrow some sugar. However, her true intent was to rob Dorothy. When she arrived at her residence, Kimberly stabbed Dorothy 5 times with a butcher knife, beat her with a candelabrum, and cut off her finger to steal her diamond wedding ring. She also stole her purse and Mercedes-Benz and pawned the diamond ring to buy crack cocaine. The next day, Kimberly was arrested and charged with murder. She had used Dorothy's credit card at a liquor store and was found with Dorothy's driver's license. Additionally, Kimberly's DNA was discovered on the murder weapon, which was located at Dorothy's home. Kimberly was convicted in 1998. Prosecutors also pointed out the fact that she had previously murdered 2 other elderly women in Dallas County to purchase cocaine. However, Kimberly was not charged with those murders. She was sentenced to death by lethal injection for killing Dorothy at Huntsville on June 26, 2013. She was pronounced dead at 6:37 p.m., 20 minutes after Texas prison officials administered a single lethal dose of pentobarbital. Her last words were, "This is not a loss. This is a win. You know where I'm going. I'm going home to be with Jesus. Keep the faith. I love you all." There was no record of a last meal. Teresa Wilson, Bean Lewis, State, Virginia. Date of execution, September 23, 2010. Lewis was convicted of killing her husband, Julian Lewis, and her stepson, Charles Lewis. Before her execution, she was the only woman on death row in Virginia. In 2002, Lewis met 21-year-old Matthew Jesse Schallenberger and 19-year-old Rodney Lamont Fuller at a Walmart in Danville and began a sexual relationship with both of them. In October 2002, Charles visited from Army training in Maryland. Teresa gave Schallenberger and Fuller $1,200 to purchase firearms and ammunition to kill Julian Lewis and his son, Charles. That was to clear the way for her to get their insurance money. They attempted to kill Julian on the road, but didn't succeed. After a week, Schallenberger and Fuller entered the Lewis's trailer through the back door Teresa had opened on purpose. While she waited in the kitchen, Schallenberger shot the sleeping Julian several times, and Fuller shot Charles in his bedroom with a shotgun. After discovering that Charles was not dead, Fuller shot him twice more. Teresa didn't call for help until 45 minutes later. While waiting for the police's arrival, she removed money from her dying husband's wallet and shared $300 between Schallenberger and Fuller. Then the duo left. However, sheriff's deputies arrived before Julian's death and heard him say, "My wife knows who done this to me." Yet, Teresa claimed that unidentified assailants had killed the two in a home invasion. Shortly after, Teresa Lewis was caught attempting to withdraw $50,000 from her dead husband's account with a forged check. She then confessed that she had paid two men to end her husband's life. During the investigation, prosecutors found that Lewis had been trying to gather the assets of her late husband and stepson even before they had been buried. On trial, the judge confirmed Teresa as the crime's mastermind and tagged her the head of this serpent. However, Teresa's lawyer said she is not mentally retarded, but very close to it. He also stated that Teresa was addicted to pain pills and was diagnosed with dependent personality disorder by 3 different forensic psychology experts. Yet, she was sentenced to death. Teresa's last meal consisted of 2 fried chicken breasts, sweet peas with butter, a Dr. Pepper, plus an apple pie for dessert. Teresa's stepdaughter, Kathy Lewis Clifton, was there to witness her execution. Apologizing for killing her brother and father, she said, "I just want Kathy to know that I love you and I'm very sorry." She spent her last hours praying and singing hymns. Teresa was executed on September 23, 2010 at 9:13 p.m. by lethal injection at Greensville Correctional Center near Jarrett. Capital punishment was abolished in Virginia on March 24, 2021, officially making Lewis the last woman to be executed in Virginia. Frances Elaine Newton, State, Texas. Date of execution, September 14, 2005. Newton was convicted of the April 7, 1987 murder of her husband, son, and daughter, who was just 21 months old. The victims were shot with a .25 caliber pistol that belonged to a man Newton frequented at the time. However, she claimed a substance dealer killed them. Prosecutors revealed that Newton purchased life insurance policies for her husband, daughter, and herself 1 month before the homicide. Each was valued at $50,000, with only Newton as the beneficiary. She claimed she signed her husband's name to keep him from finding out that she had saved money to cover the premiums. It was also discovered that Newton placed a paper bag containing the murder weapon in a relative's home shortly after the murders. On October 25, 1988, Newton was convicted and sentenced to death. 2 hours before her first scheduled execution on December 1, 2004, Texas Governor Rick Perry granted a 120-day reprieve to allow more time to test forensic evidence in the case. There were conflicting reports about whether a second gun was found at the scene. Ballistics evidence suggested that a gun recovered by police, which was allegedly linked to Newton after the crime, was the murder weapon. A relative of Newton, who was arrested shortly after the murders, claimed that a fellow inmate had bragged about killing the family. Several people, including 3 members of the jury that convicted Newton, raised concerns about evidence not presented during the trial. On August 24, 2005, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals turned down a motion for a stay of execution. It turned down another appeal on September 9th for a writ of habeas corpus. This was her 4th application. The Texas Board of Pardons and Paroles voted 7-0 on September 12th not to recommend that her sentence be commuted to life imprisonment, despite evidence raising doubt about her guilt and a letter from her husband's parents asking that her life be spared. The same day, the United States Court of Appeals for the Fifth Circuit refused an appeal of her sentence. Her new attorney, David Dow, asked Governor Perry for a 30-day stay to prove that Newton was wrongly linked to the murder weapon. However, the execution was carried out as scheduled on September 14, 2005, by lethal injection. Newton spent a little more than 17 and a half years on death row and was the third woman executed in Texas since the resumption of capital punishment in the state in 1982. Newton made no final statement and did not have a last meal request. Her story was featured in the Fatal Attraction episode, A Lethal Love. It is the 17th episode of the program's third season. It has also been featured on Deadly Women. Newton also appeared as herself in the 2006 television documentary Women on Death Row, where her guilt is questioned and her innocence is discussed. Aileen Carol Wuornos, State, Florida. Date of execution, October 9, 2002. Carol murdered 7 men within 12 months. These men were all motorists between the ages of 40 and 65. The name of the first victim was Richard Charles Mallory. The 51 years old was an electronics store owner in Clearwater. He was murdered on November 30th, 1989. Carol claimed that Mallory beat, sexually assaulted, and sodomized her in an abandoned area. She claimed to have killed him in self-defense. Later, it became known that Mallory had previously been convicted of attempted sexual assault in Maryland. 2 days after the incident, a Volusia County deputy sheriff found Mallory's abandoned vehicle. His body was found several miles away in a wooded area. He had been shot several times. 2 bullets in his left lung were found to have been the cause of death. Her next victim was David Andrew Spears. The 47-year-old man was a construction worker in Winter Garden. He was declared missing on the 19th of May, 1990. On the 1st of June, the same year, his body was found in Citrus County. He had been shot 6 times with a .22 pistol. Charles Edmond was Carol's third victim. At 40, Charles was a part-time rodeo worker. He was killed on May 31st, 1990. On June 6th, the same year, his naked body was found in Pasco County. He had been shot 9 times with a .22 caliber weapon. The body had been wrapped in an electric blanket and was badly decomposing when found. Witnesses saw Carol in possession of Charles's car. She had also pawned a gun that was identified as belonging to Charles. Peter Abraham Seams met his death through Carol. The 65-year-old man was a retired merchant seaman. Seams left Jupiter, Florida, for Arkansas. On July 4th, 1990, his car was found in Orange Springs, Florida. Carol and a man named Moore were seen abandoning the car. Her handprint was found on the interior door handle. Peter's body was never found. The next victim was Troy Eugene Burris. The 50-year-old man was a sausage salesman from Ocala, Florida. He was reported missing on July 31st, 1990. His body was later found on August 4th, 1990, in a wooded area along State Road 19 in Marion County, with marks that he had been shot twice. Charles Richard Humphrey was Carol's 6th victim. The 56-year-old man was a retired United States Air Force major, former state child abuse investigator, and former police chief. On September 12, 1990, his body was found in Marion County. He was fully clothed and had been shot 7 times in the head and torso. However, his car was found in Suwannee County. The last victim was Walter Gino Antonio. The 61-year-old was a trucker, security guard, and reserve police officer. On November 19, 1990, Antonio's nearly naked body was found near a remote logging road in Dixie County. He had been shot 4 times. 5 days later, his car was found in Brevard County. Carlos was incarcerated at the Florida Department of Corrections, Broward Correctional Institution, death row for women. She was later transferred to the Florida State Prison for execution. Her appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court was denied in 1996. In a 2001 petition to the Florida Supreme Court, she stated her intention to dismiss her legal counsel and terminate all pending appeals. "I killed those men," she wrote, "robbed them as cold as ice, and I'd do it again too. There's no chance of keeping me alive or anything because I'd kill again. I hate crawling through my system. I am so sick of hearing this 'she's crazy' stuff. I've been evaluated so many times. I'm competent, sane, and trying to tell the truth. I'm one who seriously hates human life and would kill again." Carlos's execution by lethal injection took place on October 9, 2002. She declined her last meal and opted for a cup of coffee instead. Her last words were, Yes, I would just like to say I'm sailing with the Rock, and I'll be back, like Independence Day, with Jesus. June 6th, like the movie. Big mothership and all. I'll be back. I'll be back. She died at 9:47 a.m. Linda Cheryl Lyon Block, State, Alabama. Date of execution, May 10, 2002. Block was convicted of murdering Sergeant Roger Lamar Motley, Jr. on October 4, 1993, while Block's husband, George Sibley, and her 9-year-old son were sitting in a parked car at a Walmart in Opelika, Alabama. A passerby noticed the boy and told Officer Motley that he seemed to need help. She suspected the family might be living in the car. At that time, Sibley and Block were evading authorities in Florida after skipping a court date for an assault charge involving Block's ex-husband, Carl. Officer Motley approached their car and asked Sibley for his license. Sibley claimed he told Motley he didn't need one, especially when he saw the officer reach for his gun. In response, Sibley pulled out his own gun and started shooting at Motley, who shot back and injured Sibley. Block was at a payphone when she heard the gunfire. She pulled out her gun, and bystanders reported that she was crouched when she fired. However, Block said she fired just as she started running toward Motley. As Motley turned, she fired again, hitting him in the chest. The police officer had given his bulletproof vest to another officer. Thus, he was mortally wounded. Being part of an anti-government movement, Block and Sibley had renounced their citizenship and destroyed their birth certificates, driver's licenses, and social security cards. They refused to cooperate with their court-appointed attorneys, maintaining that they had acted in self-defense. They also maintained that Alabama had no authority to try them, as it was not properly readmitted into the Union after the American Civil War. Although the court couldn't determine who fired the fatal shot, they were both convicted of capital murder and sentenced to death. Block was executed on May 10, 2002. Her execution occurred at the Holman Correctional Facility near Atmore, Alabama. Before that, 3 friends visited Block and spent several hours with her. She also asked for a spiritual advisor. She did not request a last meal or make a final statement. At approximately 12 midnight, she was placed in the electric chair, and at 12:01 a.m., the current was turned on. 10 minutes later, she was pronounced dead. She was the first woman executed in the state since Rhonda Bell Martin in 1957, and the last person in the United States to be executed by electric chair without the choice of an alternative method. If you like the way we create these videos and you want to help more cases like this to light, kindly hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives.